It was the kind of autumn morning where the mist clings to the grass like a memory refusing to fade. Rachel Palmer stood at the edge of her driveway, coffee mug warming her hands, staring at the house across the street. The Henderson place. Empty for nearly 2 decades now, its windows reflecting nothing but absence, a hollow shell that seemed to breathe with the neighborhood's whispers. "First day of demolition," said a voice behind her. Rachel turned to find Walter Briggs, the elderly neighbor who'd lived on Sycamore Lane longer than anyone else. His weathered face creased with something between concern and validation as he leaned on his walking stick. "About time," Rachel replied. "That house has been an eyesore since we moved here." Walter's eyes never left the abandoned 2-story colonial. They never left, you know. Rachel had heard Walter's theory countless times over the 5 years since she'd moved to Mapleton, Ohio. The Henderson family, David, Catherine, and their 2 children, Emily and Michael, hadn't moved to Florida in 2004, as everyone believed. Walter insisted they'd never left at all. He'd maintained this story for 20 years, through disbelief, ridicule, and eventually the community's collective indifference. "I know that's what you believe, Walter," she said gently. "Not believe. No." He tapped his temple. "I was watching that night. Middle of January. No moving truck. No cars packed with belongings. Just David Henderson carrying something heavy to his car at 3 in the morning, making 4 trips. Then nothing. Family never seen again." Rachel had heard variations of this story before. How the Hendersons had withdrawn from community life in the months prior. How their children stopped attending school abruptly, with Catherine claiming they'd switched to homeschooling. How David had apparently sold his accounting practice overnight. The hasty explanation from a distant cousin about a sudden move to Florida due to a job opportunity. The house left in limbo, property taxes paid through automatic withdrawals, mail forwarded indefinitely. Across the street, a truck pulled up bearing the logo of Newfield Construction. Men in hard hats began unloading equipment. "Did you ever tell the police your suspicions?" Rachel asked, though she knew the answer. Walter scoffed. "Course I did. 3 times over 3 years. They did a welfare check early on, found nothing concerning. Property taxes kept getting paid. No bodies, no crime. Just another family that wanted to start fresh somewhere else." He shook his head. Nobody wanted to listen to the old man who couldn't sleep at night and watch the neighborhood like a hawk. Rachel felt a familiar pang of sympathy. Walter had been widowed just months before the Hendersons' disappearance. Insomnia had made him a nocturnal sentinel of Sycamore Lane. His certainty never wavered, even as his claims grew more outlandish to younger neighbors who moved in over the years. "The renovation should be good for property values," Rachel offered, changing the subject. "That young couple has no idea what they bought," Walter muttered. The young couple were the Morans, Rachel's contemporaries in their 30s, who'd purchased the long-vacant Henderson house at auction last month. They planned to gut it completely and transform it into their dream home. "I should get to work," Rachel said, finishing her coffee. "Have a good day, Walter." As she turned to leave, Walter caught her wrist with surprising strength. "The blueprints for that house don't match what's inside," he said, his voice suddenly urgent. "The basement's all wrong." Rachel gently pulled her arm free. "I'm sure the contractors will sort all that out, Walter." Later that morning, at the elementary school where she worked as a counselor, Rachel found herself distracted. During her break, she searched online for Henderson Family Disappearance, Ohio, 2004. Nothing substantial came up, just real estate listings and social media profiles of unrelated Hendersons. She tried Mapleton, Ohio Missing Family instead. The 5th result caught her attention. A brief article from the Mapleton Gazette dated March 2005. Local police close inquiry into Henderson family. After repeated inquiries from neighbors, Mapleton Police Department has concluded that no evidence exists to suggest foul play in the January relocation of the Henderson family. "All indications point to a planned move to Florida," said Detective Michael Harmon. "Property taxes continue to be paid, and mail has been properly forwarded. Duty, a family representative confirmed the Hendersons' residence in Jacksonville, though declined to provide contact information, citing privacy concerns. Rachel scrolled through her phone, looking at community message boards until she found older posts mentioning the Hendersons. Most were mundane, recommendations for David's accounting services, Catherine's contributions to the PTA, routine neighborhood interactions. But one post, from December 2003, just weeks before their disappearance, stood out. A neighbor had inquired, "Has anyone seen Emily Henderson at school? My daughter says she hasn't been in class for over 2 weeks, and we're worried." There were no responses. As Rachel drove home that evening, she saw a crowd gathered outside the Henderson house. She parked quickly and joined her neighbors on the sidewalk. Police cars lined the street, their lights painting the gathering dusk in alternating red and blue. "What's going on?" she asked a woman standing nearby. "They found something during the demolition," the woman whispered, eyes wide. "Something in the basement." Rachel looked past the police tape to where Walter sat on his porch across the street, watching silently, his expression unreadable in the growing darkness. One thought kept circling in her mind: the basement's all wrong. The following morning, Rachel woke to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on her nightstand. It was Lisa, her colleague from school. "Have you seen the news?" Lisa's voice was pitched higher than normal. "About that house across from you?" Rachel sat up, instantly alert. "No. What happened?" "They found a hidden room in the basement. It's all over local news. They're saying it wasn't in any of the house plans." After hanging up, Rachel quickly dressed and went outside. The scene across the street had transformed overnight. The police tape had expanded to encircle the entire property. A white forensic van was parked in the driveway, and officers in various uniforms moved with deliberate purpose between the house and their vehicles. Walter was already at his usual post on his porch. Rachel crossed the street to join him. "They found it," he said without preamble, his voice oddly calm. Rachel lowered herself onto the step beside him. "What did they find exactly, Walter?" "A room, behind a false wall in the basement." His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "I told them 20 years ago something wasn't right about that basement. The exterior dimensions didn't match the interior." "How would you know that?" Rachel asked. "I helped David install a water heater back in '98. I'm good with measurements." Walter's eyes remained fixed on the house. The basement should have extended another 12 feet toward the back garden, but inside there was just a concrete wall. David said it was for structural support. A tall man in plain clothes emerged from the house, speaking quietly into his phone. "Detective," Rachel guessed by his demeanor. "What was in the room?" she asked, dreading the answer. Walter shook his head. "They wouldn't tell me, but they were here until 3 a.m., taking pictures, collecting evidence." He finally turned to look at her, his eyes reddened with either lack of sleep or emotion. "I've waited 20 years to be proven right, but now—" His voice faltered. Rachel placed her hand gently on his arm. She'd always viewed Walter as the neighborhood eccentric, his conspiracy theories about the Hendersons merely a symptom of grief and loneliness. Now she wasn't sure what to think. "Miss Palmer," a voice called from the street. The detective was walking toward them. Rachel stood. "Yes, I'm Detective Royce. Could I have a word?" He gestured toward his car. "I'll be right back," Rachel told Walter, who nodded silently. Detective Royce was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 40s, with a carefully maintained neutrality in his expression. "You're a counselor at Mapleton Elementary, correct?" he asked, once they were standing by his car. "Yes, for the past 5 years. Did you know the Henderson children?" Rachel shook her head. "I moved here long after they disappeared." She caught herself. "After they moved away." The detective nodded, making a brief note in his small notebook. "The contractor who purchased this property found a hidden room yesterday during initial demolition. Inside we discovered personal effects that appeared to belong to the Henderson family." "What kind of personal effects?" Rachel asked. "I can't share specifics during an active investigation," he replied. "But we have reason to believe the Hendersons never relocated to Florida, as was widely reported. Rachel glanced back at Walter, who was watching them intently from his porch. "Mr. Briggs has been claiming that for years," she said. "Yes, we've already spoken with him at length." The detective's expression softened slightly. "Given your role as a school counselor, we'd appreciate your assistance. We'll be showing photographs of the Henderson children at the school, speaking with staff who worked there in 2003. If any memories surface about their behavior, concerns that might have been noticed—" "Of course," Rachel said. "I'd be happy to help." Back on Walter's porch, Rachel found the old man staring at a photograph in his hands. "I went digging through my albums this morning," he said, passing it to her. It showed a neighborhood barbecue, dated July 2003 on the back. Rachel recognized a younger Walter standing beside a tall, sandy-haired man who had his arm around a petite woman with a strained smile. Two children, a teenage girl and a younger boy, stood slightly apart from their parents. "That's them," Walter said. "The girl, Emily, was 14. Michael was 9. Rachel studied their faces. Emily's posture was rigid, her smile not reaching her eyes. Michael stood partially behind his sister, as if using her as a shield. "They were quiet kids," Walter continued, "but normal, you know, until that fall. Then they just withdrew. Catherine stopped bringing them to community events, pulled them out of school in December." "Did you ever see signs of abuse?" Rachel asked, her professional instincts surfacing. Walter frowned. "Not anything you could point to, but that last year, something changed. David built that high fence around the backyard. Catherine stopped talking to the other mothers. And those kids," he paused, "they just disappeared from sight weeks before the family supposedly moved." Rachel handed the photograph back, a chill running through her despite the warm morning sun. "What do you think happened to them, Walter?" The old man pocketed the photo. "I've had 20 years to think about it. Sometimes I hope they did just move away. That all this," he gestured toward the police activity, "has some innocent explanation." His weathered face hardened. "But I saw David Henderson making those trips to his car that night, and I never saw those children leave the house." Later that afternoon, Rachel returned to find the street transformed into a media circus. News vans lined the curbs, reporters stood delivering updates to cameras, and a growing crowd of onlookers had gathered beyond the police barriers. She parked several blocks away and walked back, skirting the edge of the crowd, until she reached Walter's house. He wasn't on the porch. She found him inside, sitting in his darkened living room, the TV on but muted. "They found journals," he said without looking up. "Emily's journals, hidden in that room." Rachel sat beside him. On screen, a somber newscaster stood in front of the Henderson house. The caption read, "Breaking Hidden Room Reveals Potential Evidence in Long-Dormant Missing Persons Case." "How do you know about the journals?" she asked. Detective came by again. "Wanted to know if I'd ever heard Emily mention them." Walter finally looked at her, his eyes haunted. "I didn't, but I knew that girl was troubled. The last time I saw her, November maybe, she looked broken somehow. I should have done more, asked more questions." The news segment changed to show school photographs of Emily and Michael Henderson, their young faces now the center of a mystery 2 decades in the making. "Walter," Rachel said carefully, "what do you think is in that hidden room?" The old man's reply was barely audible. "The truth, finally." 3 days passed in a blur of police activity, media speculation, and neighborhood whispers. The Henderson house had become the center of an investigation that grew more complex by the hour. Rachel had spent each day at school, where police had set up a temporary office, interviewing staff members who'd worked there during the Hendersons' time. On Friday afternoon, Detective Royce asked Rachel to join him in the conference room where they'd been conducting interviews. "We've made significant progress," he said once they were seated. "I wanted to update you personally, given your assistance and your proximity to the investigation." Rachel nodded, noticing the dark circles under his eyes. "Have you determined what happened to the family?" "We believe so." He opened a folder between them. "What I'm about to share is not yet public information. We're holding a press conference this evening." He placed a photograph on the table. It showed a small room, perhaps 8 by 10 feet, with concrete walls. A single mattress lay on the floor. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books, notebooks, and what appeared to be canned goods. "This is the hidden room," Royce explained. "Based on construction analysis, it was built approximately 3 months before the Hendersons allegedly relocated. It looks like—" Rachel hesitated. "A shelter," Royce finished for her, "or a holding cell." He placed another photograph beside the first. This one showed an open notebook with neat, adolescent handwriting. Emily Henderson kept journals, detailed ones. They were hidden inside the wall of this room. Rachel leaned forward. "What did they say?" "They tell the story of a family in crisis. David Henderson had become increasingly paranoid in the months prior to their disappearance. He'd lost significant money in some questionable investments and believed people were monitoring his family. He began talking about going off the grid and starting fresh, where no one could find them. So Walter was right about them not going to Florida," Rachel said. "Yes and no." Royce's expression grew even more solemn. "According to Emily's final entries, David built that room as a temporary hiding place. The family was planning to leave their identities behind and start new lives under different names. But Emily wrote about her father's behavior becoming more erratic. She was frightened." Were they in that room when they disappeared?" Rachel asked, dreading the answer. "No." Royce placed a third photograph on the table. It showed what appeared to be a calendar page with days crossed off. The final journal entry was January 10th, 2004. Emily wrote that they were leaving that night. Her father had acquired new identification documents for all of them and had money stored somewhere. They were planning to drive west. "So they did leave," Rachel said, feeling a wave of relief. "Just not to Florida." Royce nodded. "We believe so. We've been working with the FBI to trace possible paths the family might have taken. The journals mentioned Montana as a potential destination. Have you found them?" "Not yet, but we've uncovered something else." The detective hesitated. The records showing continued property tax payments were falsified. The payments stopped in 2009. The county system had a glitch that failed to flag the property for tax delinquency. What does that mean? It means someone wanted it to appear that the Hendersons were still connected to this house, someone who knew enough about county systems to exploit a weakness. David Henderson was an accountant, Rachel remembered, with clients throughout the county government, Royce confirmed. "We believe he set up the system to show continued payments when there were none, to avoid attention on the property. But why maintain the illusion if they were starting new lives elsewhere?" Royce collected the photographs. "That's what we're still trying to understand." After leaving the school, Rachel drove directly to Walter's house. She found him in his garden, methodically weeding a patch of marigolds. "They're alive," she said without preamble. Walter looked up, shielding his eyes against the late afternoon sun. "You sure about that?" Rachel relayed what Detective Royce had shared. Walter listened silently, his weathered hands still among the flowers. "It doesn't feel right," he finally said. 20 years, not a word from any of them. Those kids would be adults now. Why wouldn't they reach out to someone? Old friends? Extended family? Fear, maybe. If their father was as paranoid as Emily's journals suggest. Or guilt, Walter interrupted. "Have they found David's accounting records, his client files?" Rachel frowned. "I don't know why. Because I remember rumors. Nothing concrete. But David had some clients that weren't exactly upstanding. There were whispers about money laundering. Nothing that ever came to anything." Later that evening, Rachel and Walter sat side by side on his porch, watching the media circus across the street as Detective Royce delivered a carefully worded statement to the press. The hidden room was described as a preparatory space for the family's undocumented relocation. The investigation was ongoing, with promising leads. "They're not telling everything," Walter murmured. Rachel had the same feeling. Something wasn't fitting together properly. 2 more days passed. The media presence dwindled as the novelty of the story faded. But on Monday morning, Rachel woke to insistent knocking at her door. It was Walter, holding his tablet. "You need to see this." He pulled up a news article from a small Montana newspaper. Breaking: woman claiming to be long-missing Ohio teen found in Bitterroot Valley. The article was brief but explosive. A woman in her mid-30s had approached local police, identifying herself as Emily Henderson, missing since 2004 from Mapleton, Ohio. She claimed she had been living under an assumed identity provided by her father. After seeing news reports about the discovery at her childhood home, she had decided to come forward. "She's alive," Rachel whispered. Walter's eyes glistened with unshed tears. One of them, at least. The next 48 hours unfolded with dizzying speed. Emily Henderson's identity was confirmed through DNA testing. She was flown back to Ohio, where she provided a formal statement to investigators. By Wednesday, Rachel and Walter were sitting together in Detective Royce's office, listening as he outlined what they now knew. "Emily's testimony fills in many of the gaps," Royce explained. David Henderson had indeed become increasingly paranoid in late 2003. He was convinced that certain clients had discovered he had evidence of their financial crimes. He built the hidden room as a temporary measure while planning their escape. "And the other family members?" Walter asked, his voice rough with emotion. Royce's expression grew somber. "According to Emily, they did leave Mapleton that January night driving west as planned. But near the Iowa border, her father became convinced they were being followed. He separated the family. Emily was sent on a bus to Montana with a new identity. Catherine took Michael to Washington State." "And David?" Rachel asked. "Emily never saw her father again. Based on her testimony and our investigation, we believe David Henderson returned to Mapleton briefly in early 2004, possibly to retrieve documents he'd hidden in the house. He then disappeared again. The trips to the car that night," Walter said quietly. "I saw him," Royce nodded. "You were right all along, Mr. Briggs. The family never moved to Florida. The cousin who confirmed their relocation was actually a business associate of David's who agreed to maintain the cover story." "What about Catherine and Michael?" Rachel asked. "We've located Catherine," Royce said. "She's living under an assumed name in Seattle. We're arranging for her to come in for questioning." "And Michael?" Walter pressed. A heavy silence filled the room. "We don't know yet," Royce finally admitted. "Catherine lost contact with him 10 years ago. He'd be 29 now." 2 weeks later, Rachel stood beside Walter in the Mapleton Cemetery, where a small gathering had assembled for a memorial service. Not for the Hendersons, who were, against all odds, mostly alive, but for the truth that had remained buried for 20 years. Emily Henderson, now Emily Lawson, stood at the front of the group. She'd spent the past weeks cooperating with authorities, helping to piece together the fragmented story of her family's disappearance. Her mother, Catherine, had joined her, though their reunion had been complicated by years of separation and secrets. "I never thought I'd come back here," Emily said, addressing the small crowd. "Our father convinced us that silence was survival, that looking back meant certain danger." She glanced at her mother. "It took seeing our old house on the news to realize we'd been running from ghosts." As the gathering dispersed, Emily approached Walter. "You're the neighbor," she said. "The one who saw my father that night." Walter nodded. "I tried to tell people something wasn't right." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for not forgetting us." Later, as Rachel and Walter walked slowly back to their homes on Sycamore Lane, the old man paused to look at the Henderson house, now quiet again, as the investigation continued inside. 20 years, he murmured. "All that time, I thought I knew what happened, that something terrible had occurred in that house." "In a way it did," Rachel replied. "A family was torn apart by fear." Walter nodded slowly. "The truth was somehow both better and worse than I imagined." He turned to her with a sad smile. "But at least now they can stop running." Across the street, workers were boarding up the entrance to the hidden room that had finally yielded its secrets. Some questions remained unanswered. The whereabouts of Michael Henderson, the full extent of David's involvement with criminal elements, the reason for 20 years of silence. But the whispers of Mapleton had finally been given voice. The truth, like the family it concerned, had been hidden in plain sight all along. If you found this story compelling, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more mysterious tales of disappearances and discoveries. A new video is appearing on your screen right now. Click to watch another story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Remember, sometimes the truth isn't buried 6 feet under, it's hiding behind the walls we pass by every day.